Welcome to Season 3 of Concrete Conversations, the Indian Real Estate Podcast. Recently, the lines between hospitality and commercial spaces have started to blur as the demand for premium amenities in Grade A office buildings rises and members' clubs and collaborative spaces proliferate across India. There are efforts to reposition the traditional office building and change the way we work and engage with them while also increasing the utilization of these spaces. To navigate this evolving landscape, we have with us today Mr. Vivek Narain, the founder of Quorum Club and District 150. Mr. Narayan started his career in banking and transitioned into hospitality through a groundbreaking transaction in 2006 when he was a part of the sponsor team for the Indian Hospitality Corp, the first India-focused SPAC. In 2018, Mr. Narayan co-founded the Quorum, a members club business that looked to reinvent this traditional landscape with a more contemporary perspective. His latest venture, District 150, is a hospitality-powered meetings and events hub looking to bridge the gap between a hotel and the future office. In today's episode, we'll dive into the world of multi-purpose spaces and how they could change our own work lives, especially in a post-COVID world. So without further ado, let's get started. So Vivek, good morning. Welcome to Concrete Conversations in video form now. We're really happy to have you here today and to know more about District 150 and Quorum as well. So usually we like to start off by asking our guests a little bit about their journey and how they got to where they are today, how they got to founding the companies that they're working at today. So if you could tell us a little bit about your career journey and how you ended up working in like a real estate adjacent industry, I guess.
Yeah. Well, listen. Good morning, guys. Yash, Akshay. Thanks for having me on the pod. Yeah. So I guess my background's been, I guess, like a lot of people, it's a bit non-conformist. At least mine has been non-conformist. I started my career in banking. I was in the U.S. for my undergraduate and did, started my career there with an English bank in New York City. Spent about 5 years there. Came back after 9/11, so I guess I'm giving my age away. Um, you know, Came back to India 2002. There was obviously a little bit of disruption in the world around that time, and that was the catalyst for me to come back. Continued the banking career. In fact, was part of a team. Lucky enough to be part of a team that started a new bank at that time. There were a couple of new licenses that were given. So got a little bit of an entrepreneurial experience in an entrepreneurial setup per se. Not it was not my entrepreneurial journey, but it was an entrepreneurial setup. And then in 2006, 7, I led a private equity transaction in a personal advisory capacity after I left the bank in the hospitality space. And that really was the transition from banking to kind of hospitality. And that started a journey for about the next 7 or 8 years where I did one or two things in the hospitality space and got exposed to that space. And then about 2014, 15, I hit a bit of a crossroad where I think I was unemployable. So I was forced into entrepreneurship. And at that time, I'd seen a sort of 5, 7 year renaissance of this members club contemporary format around the world. I was lucky enough to got exposed to it because of what I had done in the previous 5 or 7 years, and I just felt like it was the right time to try and do that. And it was a bit of an ambitious project, a couple of false starts, but that's really where I got to where I was, and the rest, as they say, perhaps is history or not. It's the beginning of what we're doing now, but
Right.
that was really the background. And so it wasn't predetermined. It wasn't something that I had in my mind throughout. It was just I was at a crossroad, and it just so happened that I managed to put a few of my personal interests into what I did. So I was lucky that I managed to found a business which dovetailed with my interests and at least what I thought were my skill sets.
Right. Right. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Actually, I'm curious because we're going to talk more about this as we go forward in the conversation. But the idea, like you mentioned, you came across the idea of the members only clubs, the networking groups, the community aspect through your time in hospitality. I'm just curious as to what was the point, like the first time you engaged with that concept and the point of inception for you with this idea.
Yeah, so I worked one of my last stints before I went into the entrepreneurial sort of plunge was with a global hospitality company called Fairmont Raffles
Right.
Hotel. Now the Accor Group. At the time, they were independently owned by a bunch of global investors, and I just running development for them across South Asia. I got to travel a lot, and during those travels, I visited a few clubs in London. I visited a few clubs in Asia, and that was really what kind of inspired or sparked kind of the idea. I mean, Soho House had been around, which is obviously the
Right.
big global brand in this space
Yeah.
for 5, 10 years. But for every Soho House, there was about 5 or 7 or 10 independently run, personality-driven clubs popping up in cities around the world. Now, obviously, London was always the club capital of the world.
Right.
So they've always
Yeah.
had this
Yeah.
sort of club culture that a lot of other cities started to pick up and get inspired from, and really, it was this. And the new, I mean, and we can talk a little bit about what that new contemporary version was, but kind of, I'd experienced hospitality from an investment perspective, and I felt the business model economically made sense.
Right.
Um, and these are assumptions that made sense on paper. I think it was a little tougher to get it going when we really started, but I mean, that's the journey of every entrepreneur, I guess. So.
Right. Right. So Vivek, the like you said, certain cities have a club culture, and it's been a part of the fabric of the city, sort of. But in India, for us, there have been traditional spaces, that member only spaces like gymkhanas, that have been around for you know some of them even more than 100 years. And so I wanted to ask, how does one bring this concept into? How does one interpret this concept for today's times in India? And how does one make that distinction between the kind of legacy formats of member only groups versus what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, actually, that's the opportunity. Funny enough, so people say, "Oh, how are you going to do it in an environment where it already exists?" And I actually, funny enough, that was the opportunity. And I'll tell you, first of all, there are a couple of different genre of clubs. Broadly three. One is your country sort of athletic clubs, which are sports focused. Which some of these were nice big lawns and tennis courts and what have you. The other, obviously, obviously a lot of US centric, but globally quite prevalent as well, are the golf clubs. In India, we've got about 15, 20, but we don't, land's quite expensive. We don't have a lot of golf in this country. Um, and then obviously the third genre is the city club, right, which is kind of a meeting, entertaining, dining, sort of business networking, if you want to call it that. City clubs. They've also existed. We picked up on what was the contemporary sort of version of this, and the idea was create this third space which was relevant through the day, and yeah, the bedrock obviously was great hospitality, and to answer your question on where the opportunity was in the context of what existed or what exists, is actually the whole idea of the club is building a community of like-minded people around shared interests, right? The community gets built around that, right? Now, the gymkhanas of the world was were curated. Their communities were curated, like you said, 100 years ago, and I could argue that the relevance of that is less sort of important in the context of where India is or where any other country is. So, and without getting into details and snubbing people, because I've got a habit of doing that, so I should keep quiet. But I just feel like as a country we moved on. I read a book many years ago called The King of Clubs. It kind of inspired me. It was written by a gentleman called Bob Dedman. Bob Dedman started a club business, which is a publicly listed entity now. It's got 150 clubs in the US. It was called Club Corporation of America. And he started it in the 1960s. And I read his autobiography. And there he said something that really sort of stuck with me. He said, I drew some parallels of where America was in the 60s and where we are right now as a country. It was a country on the move. It was a country with a lot of upward mobility. It was a country which was transient, where people moved to new cities for opportunities, for life. And as that happened in higher levels of intensity, the more they needed a place of belonging. So I think the gap was there. And like India at that time, America also had a lot of these, what I call establishment clubs, right? And but they were their their philosophy was about keeping people out, not letting them in. So there was just this gap then, and I read that, and I said, hey, there's a gap here as well. And we started in Gurgaon. I think the epitome of a city that's a new city in the context of India, where people from
Right.
all over the country live there and made that their home. And I'm really glad we started there. We started there by chance. All of this is hindsight, obviously, but I'm really glad we started there because we had this cohort of really interesting people that just didn't know each other. They didn't have a platform to come together, and maybe they did know each other, but they didn't have a platform to connect, collide with each other organically, and that's kind of what we ended up solving, and I hope we continue to do so as we grow our business.
And on the other side, we now have an increased focus on large built commercial spaces, and also an increase in amenities, since people do have sort of work centric life where they are in these office spaces for a long time. We've seen that happen through the managed and co-working sort of space. So I wanted to ask you, how do you see what you're doing in relation to that as well? Because that's another sort of maybe adjacent area that's kind of developed in Indian real estate over the last few
Yeah.
years.
Listen, that's well, accidental for us. I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to lie. When I started this business in 2016 November, we locked up our first piece of real estate.
Right.
I couldn't. I took a year and a half. I failed about 5 times. So I had a concept. I had people say, "Hey, this sounds like a good idea," but I had to get the real estate to raise capital, and I needed the capital to get the real estate. So I was stuck in this sort of chicken and egg scenario. And I tried, I tried a number of things, and tried to sort of mask my sort of lack of, preparedness at the time. So the only space I could actually get was an office building. So
Right.
I accidentally moved into an office building back in 2016. And it's funny, I got into this office building on Golf Course Road, which was under construction at the time. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Gurgaon, but
Mhm.
we're in this building called Horizon Center, which
Right,
I
Right.
right.
think is probably
Yash is
one of
more
the
familiar
best.
than I am, but yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably one of the most sort of prolific sort of destinations now in the
Definitely.
country. Yeah.
Mhm.
And at the time, the road was under construction and this building was kind of just coming up, and people said, "What the hell is this? And where are you going?" And so, listen, that's luck. So we got in, and so to answer your question, Yash, we accidentally stumbled upon creating a hotel type facility, because that's what we really did with the hospitality, grade A hospitality facility within a grade A building, and that gave us a front row seat on what's has transpired over the next 5-7 years in work and workplace, and what's the requirements, and these things were happening slowly. We didn't know it. I'll be honest with
Hmm.
you. We accidentally put ourselves on the front row of what was happening, and then obviously the pandemic also kind of accelerated it. And now
Right.
I can look back and say, I can pretend that there was, I was the vision from day one, but we got here. Having said that, we are where we are now, and I think today the role of the office building is definitely changing. I think it's more prevalent in the Western markets currently, but I think it's going to happen in India, or it's already happening in India as well.
Hmm.
And I firmly believe that the world of hotels and offices are converging, and we are, standing by chance on that convergence, and we're luckily have a little bit of a head start, and we're creating some interesting products, concepts, and using our learnings to build our business through that now.
And following on from that, to get into the sort of proverbial nuts and bolts of the matter, like you said, there's a sort of convergence coming between workspaces and hospitality as well. So when you now that you actually got a space, for example, when you design a space like this that is part hospitality centric and part networking and work centric as well, what are the sort of design considerations that go into that design, and what sort of amenities and services that do you think are super important to provide right from the outset?
Yeah, interesting. If I may, before I answer that question, just say, you made a concept about sort of co-working and managed offices and all of that.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's not hospitality. I
Right.
think they'll
Right.
tell you it's hospitality, but it's not hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
The word flexible is basically flexible lease terms, right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and maybe some flexible seating, and beyond that, it's that's really what it is, right? We are a hotel in an office building, right?
Okay.
So
Right.
the kind of services that go into it, the back of house, the support, the kitchens, the industrial, requirements that are there are like the way you would see it at a Taj or an Oberoi or an ITC or
Mm-hmm.
any hotel. So very, very, very different than having a sandwich in a refrigerator that you pick up when
Right,
you're in a
right.
co. But I
No,
really need to get on something. I do, but this gets confused all the time.
No, of course. I
So
think the
that's one.
context is really important here because it's a bit of a spectrum at this point, right? Like there
No, it's
is
a
a
huge
little bit of
spectrum. We're a totally different business. We don't compete with them at all. Fundamentally, I tell people we are a hospitality business. We've got
right,
350 employees now. 75, 80 of them are on our kitchen and production side. We are a core
right,
food and beverage business. And I
right,
tell my people, if we don't get that right, we're nothing. Right. So, and that's a given. And not right. We need to be, it's got to be excellence. Right. At some level, we compete with the hotel chains and the large restaurants. I mean, that's really what our competition is. But
mhm,
then, from a design perspective, just to kind of finish the loop on your question, um, you know, we I very I wanted to create this third space which had to ergonomically work for a utility during the daytime, a utility then and then transition it quite effortlessly into an evening use, right? And
right,
that sort of went
right,
through
right,
every decision we made, from flooring to furniture to the way the table heights and chair height, so that you can have laptops and dine and lounge. So these are the things that we consider, from lighting to how it transforms into a jazz space and a conversation space, from the acoustics. We thought through this on every aspect, because we envisioned what the utility and end utility would be. I just leave it with the last thought. When I invested in restaurants through this private equity transaction I did back in 2006, it kind of, what really stuck out to me is that for a lot of hospitality businesses, the revenue window is about 3 or 4 hours a day, right? But the cost is
right,
24
right,
hours a day. You're paying rent, you've got your employees. It's not like you're coming in and you're just like get paid. Because so I also thought about that a lot. I said, how do I make a space that's relevant through the day, and design with part of that decision well. So yeah, just to answer your question on design, I mean, we thought about it a lot. We've learned a lot. I mean, we're on our third club now, and the ergonomics, the flow, the hospitality, the service. All of that is a very integral part of what we do, from the lighting, the sound. I call it the senses, all the senses. Right.
right.
So, and it's very different to sort of co-working or managed offices, or
right, right.
being that spectrum of stuff that exists today.
Right, absolutely, and now I think we're getting a good sense of the scope of the services that you offer and the way the facilities works. We know that you have two offerings, the Quorum Club, and then you're
Yeah,
looking at launching District 150. So I
that's
think
correct.
this would be a good point to take a pause and ask you to maybe differentiate between the two offerings that you have, and then what the idea was behind setting up District 150 as distinct from the Quorum Club.
Yeah. So listen, just to sort of, if I could just summarize what is quorum, and then before I go into District 150, to kind
Sure,
of
sure, sure.
your listeners may understand. I hope not nuanced and distinct difference between the two. Quorum obviously is a sort of a hotel type facility in an office building, which is what we started with. It's community driven,
Right.
and we have a membership model where we people sort of through reference referrals, our invites, through finding out, become our members. We use programming and content and ideas to not only attract a certain kind of people, because certain kind of people are attracted to certain kind of things. Not everything is
Right,
for everyone,
right.
right? So we use that a little tactically and strategically, and then give them this all day space that's kind of they can use for meetings, work, socializing, entertaining, getting engaged, and hopefully meeting interesting people as well. So that's kind of what Quorum is. It's a traditional sort of club, community-driven space, but again, with hospitality. We had created some event spaces in Quorum as well. We had a small little banquet space in our Quorum. We
Right.
realized that the demand for that was just crazy, right?
Right. Right.
And
Right.
the
Very.
hotels, which is who would be where you would normally go for it, were asleep on the wheel, right? And continue to be. And I'll tell you why. They are designed for weddings, primarily. The banquet and
Right.
businesses and hotels are designed for weddings from the right, just from a design perspective.
Right.
The flowery carpets and the chandeliers, right? So
Right.
it just felt like this contemporary meeting and events infrastructure just is in short supply. And we felt that the office building, because we were already in the office building, we felt that the office building could actually play a role in filling this gap. It's made for the large movements of people, right? It's got so just from a egress perspective of getting in and getting out of buildings, it's got plenty of parking. It tends to be sort of empty at night, so there was an opportunity there to create this social infrastructure, right? And then you've got this great economic sort of boom that our country is having. So forget hybrid work for a minute, but just the need and demand for meeting and event spaces is going up, right? As the economy grow, meeting and event. But the supply side, I don't know if you know, guys, follow what's happening in the hotel space, but hotels tend to be a bit cyclical. The
Right.
last real hotel supply sort of that hit our markets started in 2001, 2, came into market 7, 8, got slammed because of the economic environment changing.
Mm.
And, now they're starting to do well. A lot of them bled, a lot of
Right.
them changed hands because of that. And I'll tell you one thing: you ask people, no one said, "I don't want to build, I don't want to get into the hotel business. It's too risky. There's no, you know." So you had this supply issue where there's not a lot of new supply in our market for meeting and event spaces. So we said, and then you've got a 7-year development cycle by the time you buy land and build and go through 750 million permissions and 100 different sort of
Uh,
hurdles that will hit you in developing anything in India. So we said, listen, can we use the office building to create great meeting and event spaces because there's just there's a demand, lack of supply, and use our learnings and then if you layer in um, a couple of other things that kind of started to make sense to us. One is office buildings are looking to differentiate themselves. They're looking for these venues that could perhaps tell their tenants or their client base, hey, don't use the four walls of your space that you're renting out to make meeting rooms that end up being empty. But we've got this infra that's part of the core amenity in your building. Come and use it. So get more efficient with your design and what you're paying for within the four walls of your space. So we do a lot of programming, guys, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about it. I found that there's just no cultural infrastructure in our country. Where are the theater? Where are the plays? So we design spaces that could double up and become a platform for a lot of the content that exists there. Then that tenant
right.
engagement happens in the building, which is a nightmare for the developer or the HR, right? It's not their core business. So I kind of we
Right.
said, we're doing all of this. Can we piece this together? Now, District 150 is open to all, right? Quorum obviously is for a slightly close knit community of people that are within. So these are the two differences, and this really is a venue rent. I think since you guys brought up co-working, if we work, probably not an appropriate analogy now because of the problems they're going through globally, but if we work was the epitome of co-working, I think District 150 is we venues. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. So that's what we're training. We're training we venues. We're using office buildings to become. Yeah, people understand it when I say that. And again, we've got all these little meeting and event spaces, banquet halls, creatively designed spaces that are for learning and development in the day, for corporate events in the day, but they're designed with the intent to become social and cultural infrastructure at night. And you can have small little theater or music and I spoke to Spotify and I said, we have so many indie artists, we don't know venues. Book My Show
Yeah.
has so many comedy, where there are no venues, right? So, and I'm not getting up on stage and performing. I'm just saying, so we've got these venues come in. So I think there's so much content out there. There's demand there. There was just no platform that was nice, well designed, works. It was built for the intent of this as opposed to jugaad, use this room, isme ye dal do, ye kar lo. It's kind of what we normally do in this country. So that's really what the inspiration for District 150 is. And I think we're excited. I think it's super scalable as well. I sense that every grade A office building can have a District 150 equivalent. And
Right.
are really, Quorum that way not scalable because you got to build the community so for me, this is a kind of a scalable pivot for our learnings over the last 7 years. And we're going to build these two businesses out in parallel. The first one opens, District 150 opens in 30 days from now. So,
Right.
so let's see, the aspirations to go, let's get the first
Right.
one right.
When we had spoken last, you told us a little bit about the inspiration behind the name
Yeah.
District 150, and I thought that it was a very interesting tidbit to add to this. So if you could just share that with our listeners as well.
Yeah, I was told many years ago that if an entrepreneur can't come up with the name of the business, then he shouldn't get into it. So quorum, interestingly, is I'll start with quorum. Quorum means the minimum amount of people required to make a decision. I thought it was an interesting play on building a community of the sort of top echelon of interesting folks. And then I'd read this Yuval Harari's book *Sapiens*, and I couldn't read the actual book. I have to be honest with you. It was the illustrated version, which I highly
Right.
recommend to everyone.
I can relate
It's
to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's super creatively put together. So it was the illustrated version. I was reading it to my son, and I was reading the chapter, and it was about. So there's an anthropologist. His name
Mm.
is Robin Dunbar, and Dunbar has this theory of having studied the physiology of the human brain, and using that, going back to the hunter gatherer period, had this philosophy or this sort of analysis where he said that you can only have 150 stable meaningful relationships. In the way the physiology of the human brain works. After 150, the competing interests start to sort of form. So tribes after
Right.
150, got competing interests. Cavalries, for example, are never more than 150. It's kind of the upper limit. And
Interesting.
so I started digging deeper into it, and then he went on to say that, and obviously human beings have collaborated in much larger numbers, but we needed storytelling and fiction to bring us together after 150. So that's where the idea of, according to him, religion, the idea of a corporation, nationhood, sort of to come together. And we've used these sort of anchors to tell stories and bring people together. So I was just kind of fascinated by it. So 150 was the maximum amount of stability of relationships. Quorum and the minimum, I think one was an open to all larger space. So District
Right.
150 was kind of, and then obviously District, because it was a physical space,
Mm.
it's kind of, we're accident placemakers as well through what we're doing. And so District 150 is really inspired from that. And it's not limited to 150. Yeah, just so you know, the space is quite large. But we wanted to kind of play on that idea of also collaboration. It's a
Mm.
great space for people to come together.
Right. I think that's a fantastic dichotomy when you talk about like building both of these out in parallel in different directions. So it's really cool to see. Just to sort of dig in a little deeper to the offerings that you have. Uh, are there any notable unique amenities or service in either Quorum or District 150, other than what we've already talked about, that you think stand out specific to you as a brand and stand out different from other market
If I could
offerings within?
just add on a little bit to that, any unique events that you guys have done as well, or something, any unique collaborations or something that you've done as well, we would love to hear about that.
Yeah. Quorum is a. I'd start with Quorum, and I'd start with the events. Listen, we've done 1,000 events in the last 5 years
Mm-hmm.
across the
Right.
city. So, we've had speakers from politicians to global business leaders to economists to Nobel laureates.
Right.
We've had two Nobel laureates come and speak at the Quorum. So we always wanted to become a little platform for ideas, and
Mm.
we fortunately sort of I've sort of done a reasonably good job at that, and I continue to become one. And it's not all serious stuff. It's also fun lifestyle. So the idea was to kind of really mix it up because you wanted to build a diverse community of people. We did a movie last night, a screening. I thought it was a really creative, interesting idea. They screened Ratatouille, and basically they served whatever was being served, and the movie was served to you. So you kind of experience the movie eating the food. So I think that was a really creative. I've got this young, really great creative team that sort of scours the world of what's happening, and we kind of adapt it to what we're doing. So that's kind of Quorum from a programming perspective, from a design and facilities perspective. Listen, it's a 5-star hotel without rooms. Yeah, if I can just put it there, right? Um, it's creatively designed. It's got a great gym. It's got great meeting spaces. It's got an event spaces. It's got the members area. It's got dining set part of it. We've got a little art gallery in the Quorum. That's something we designed from day one, and the idea was not to to sell art. I felt like the art gallery model was broken for the same reason we just talked about, because of the economics of real estate in our country, right? And I felt like we can use, and I don't know anything about art, so let me just caveat that. But I felt like the world of art sort of spoke a language that no one understood. It was a bit intimidating, and I said, how can we use art to become a conversation starter and demystify it and maybe just simplify it? So that was the intention between Quorum. So that's kind of what Quorum is. We created this very interesting room in District 150 called the Stage. I had 8-meter heights, and it's kind of an opera style sort of tiered room, which is learning and development by day. And I don't know what we're going to do, but I think we can use theater at night. So we're going to find out. We're going to find out in a month's time what we're
Perfect.
going
Yeah,
to
and
do it.
that sounds exciting, and I'm excited to see where all it goes and what other new ideas your amazingly creative team can come up with, because these do sound quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just a quick question that I wanted to ask is, what is the relationship like with developers and investors now that you're scaling, given that, there is some synergy here between, like you said, commercial spaces and what you're doing as well. So, how does that work? Is it a vanilla like lease thing, or are you looking at different models in the future?
Yeah. Um, yeah. The developer community is an interesting community. We are. What's good, interestingly, because we're primarily focused on office buildings. Um, most office buildings on the grade A side are institutionally owned. So I think that's an interesting sort of thing that is worth pointing out. And it's a reasonably new phenomena. You've got the GICs and the Blackstones and the Brookfields and the Xanders and some of the REITs that are out there now. So you see now office owners, or for a large part, some of the grade A are institutionally owned. They're not independently small developer owned. So I think that's something that's worth noting as I answer your question. On the Quorum side, we like to own the P&L. We
Right.
lease. Increasingly, the first one was a plain vanilla lease. As we've got slightly more credible in what we do, I think, we're moving towards more kind of a risk sharing model on the revenue side. We
Right.
like putting up the capital. We like owning the P&L of Quorum, and I think that would continue to be our model going forward as far as Quorum is concerned. I think developers are increasingly seeing us being an interesting anchor. I think we're getting uh, to a place where we're getting a anchor rates, which
Right.
is slightly more favorable than vanilla plane. And I think as because we've demonstrated that we've added value to the overall building. Um, the same team approach it's a slightly different approach for District 150. Our first District 150 is actually an asset light. It's
Mm.
co-owned by Satva and Blackstone. There are joint ventures in Hyderabad and a very, very large
Right.
developer called Knowledge City.
Right.
And I've had a privileged relationship with the folks at Blackstone, and they've been very supportive of what we're doing, and they kind of see it, and they're seeing it globally. And like I said, we're dealing
Right.
with
Right.
people who get it, right? And they actually kind of nudged me in this direction. They said, "Why don't you create a concept where we see the need for this amenitization, of our
Mm.
office building?" So that's actually for the first one, they put the capital up, and we're a management, we own brand obviously, and so it's like a hotel management agreement, very sort of crudely put. Going forward, I think it'll be kind of hybrid, but we see this as our District 150 is more partnership with developers. We really believe we're helping them solve one or two things. One is we're helping them differentiate the building. I have no doubt that if we get this right, which we will help um, drive some level of higher sort of realizations on them on rent and velocity of their leasing efforts. And I don't need to tell you guys how that works, but higher rents are increase equal to higher capital value, and higher capital value is why they do what they do.
Yeah.
At the end of
Right.
it, so
Right.
we can contribute to that. Um, I was I was I was told about this interesting term the other day, or an interesting way to sort of coin this word. We're decimal dust in terms of the kind of returns that we hope we can perhaps contribute to if we get it right. The
Right.
cost of our amenities is decimal dust for them, right? So like I said, we're going to get the first one right. We'll be asset right. I don't think we'll be entirely asset right in all our cases. We'll be asset right. Key is be in the right locations, be in a location where you've got defined demand. We don't want to just go in for it because the building is doing it, right? At the end of the day, we've got to
Right.
build.
Right.
at the end of the location. I think that adage from a real estate perspective will never change, no matter what you do.
Right. Well, you're talking about location. Over here in the USA, there's this idea that whenever a Whole Foods moves into a particular market, that market is suddenly going to pick up, and that's when the market starts to change in terms of rents and the kind of
Yeah.
developers and industry players that come in. Thinking about the
I
future
think
for
hospitality plays a role as well, right?
true, true, yeah,
And this is kind of what's placemaking. I think SOAS is a great example as well, a great global brand where they go, they redefine neighborhoods. I think another great hotel brand that's done that is Hoxton. I don't know if you guys have come across the brand, but again, these are placemakers that bring community and the right kind of people and the right gentry, and that has a nice trickle down effect on on the overall community. I don't think we're there yet. I hope we can become something like that. But
right,
I want you to be mindful. I don't want to be too early in the market as well and bleed till that happens. So we got
right.
to be smart about that. So unless we get stuff for free, which I don't think we're going to get. So you got to balance that. You don't want to be too early in the market either. So
Right, right. Um, well, I think you've kind of answered the question that I was about to ask you already, which was sort of just getting a sense of keeping these ideas in mind, what the future you had in mind for Quorum Club and District 15 were. So, if there's anything else you want to add to that thought, then please feel free to. We can go
yeah,
ahead with
I
that.
mean, listen, these things will keep changing in terms of what we want to do. But from where we currently stand, I think we can have I see about 6 quorum clubs around the country. I want to
Okay.
focus on India. I get people saying, let's go. Why don't you go offshore? Why don't you go to Dubai? But I said, there's so much to do here.
Right.
Let's just kind of focus here. So we've currently got Gurgaon, we've got Mumbai, we've got Hyderabad opening
Right.
90 days to about 100 days. We have to be in Bangalore.
Right.
I think we need to be in
Yeah.
Goa. I think Goa has become a city. People don't realize. I actually live there. I think a lot of people live in Goa now.
Right.
As far as District 150 is concerned, I think it's a little bit more templated in terms of its ability to scale.
Mhm.
And I think every city can have 2 or 3 of these because we're really competing against the lack of hotel infrastructure, right? That's not coming
Right.
at
Right.
the scale at which the demand demands it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I think it's a good building, and we like to be, if ideally go in at the early stages of the design so that it just fits well, so that even
Mhm.
you sit outside of the turnstile, for example, you don't go in. And from a security breach perspective, so like I said, we've had this front row seat of understanding the office building a little bit,
Right.
a little bit
Right.
more than other folks, just because we by default got there. So listen. I think we do 5 in the next 5 years. We've done well, but I think we want to create a model that gets scalable, and I think we can have 20, 30 of them. District 150s.
Right.
I think cities could have multiple different neighborhoods. Could have any, as long as it's a good building, it's got good location, it's got the right demand. I think when I just add this for both District 150 and Core, we don't want just the office demand. We need the residential catchment in equal measure.
Right.
Because
Right.
I don't
Right.
make money selling you coffee. You've got to pop the
Hmm.
champagne too. So you've got to make sure that you get that morning and evening business. So
Right.
then
Right.
we look at that. Is this got both catchments? Resi and commercial and
Mhm.
work and play both.
Okay. Yeah. I think that sounds perfect. I think with that, we've come to the end of our conversation today. But Vivek, thank you so much for joining us at Concrete Conversations. We've had a great time speaking with you, and we wish you all the best. We're excited for the launch of District 150, and we look forward to seeing where you go in the future.
That's very kind of you, Akshay. Yash, thanks very much for doing this. And again, early morning on a Saturday, but come and see us. Come and see us at District 150 in about a month's time. Seeing is, I hope, believing. We're excited about it. And again, thank you for doing this and giving us a platform.
Thank you for checking out Concrete Conversations, the Indian real estate podcast. Check us out on Instagram for more short form content and highlights from our episodes. And if you have any questions, do comment on the video and let us know, and we'll try to answer them in an upcoming episode.